What's up, everybody? Welcome to tonight's Hockey Night in New York pregame Twitter space. Switching things up tonight. Good vibes in Islanders country with a big test versus Brock Nelson and the Avs. I'm Sean Cuthbert here with Arthur Staple and our moderator for the evening, Mr. Jake the Snake Radonis. Fellas, how you doing?
Well, good, Sean. How are we doing?
We're doing good. Little pleasant surprise this week. Looking forward to chatting all about it. But before we get going, just want to thank our great sponsors, Knock Hockey and Razor Kniffen Lonstein, for supporting the show as always. And I want to let everybody know we are back for a pregame show next week. But this time it's a 2 p.m. Sunday live from Bagel Boss in Hewlett before the Isles host Seattle at 5 p.m. at UBS Arena. That's right, your bagel before the stable. Come on down, grab a bite, and hang with us for the show. And if you wear your Isles gear, you will get 10% off your food order. They got plenty of seating for you to come down and hang with us while we talk Islanders. And of course, the great Donnie Bagels of Blue Line Deli fame will be there. So come hang out, come say hello, and hang with us while we talk Islanders. All right, now let's talk about some recent developments. 3 straight overtime wins on the road over Jersey, over Vegas, and of course, Utah Friday evening. This is the first time the Isles have won 3 straight in overtime. Thank you to Eric Hornick of the NYI Skinny. They did it a different way each time, but they all took on a theme of the Isles weathering a storm in the early going, getting bailed out by the goaltending before settling in and making a push. Arthur, what did you see out of these games here?
Yeah, I saw a team, Sean, that is starting to learn how to win games no matter what's going on in the game. I mean, it's you think back to the 3-game losing streak to open the season where didn't look good. They were giving up too much. They weren't scoring enough. Even that 3-game winless streak they had with the shootout loss in Philly and then the bad looking losses in Boston and Carolina. You were like, I don't know if this team is going to find that consistent level where you just figure out how to win games when you're not at your best, when you're not producing enough, when you're not doing all the things to kind of dominate a game. And I think they found it. I don't know if it was just the confidence builder at the Garden last weekend where they really owned, pretty much all of that game up till it
Yeah.
stopped mattering in the third period. But these games, like you said, they all kind of had different paths to the end of it. The Jersey game, a really good game, a hard fought game, great game for Sorokin. They get the bad luck tying goal in the final, and we're thinking, all right, here's a 6-on-5 goal. We've seen this movie
Yep.
before. And then Matthew Barzal blows by everybody for the OT winner and sends everybody home happy. All the Islanders fans that made the trek to Newark. They head out on the road. And we were certainly talked enough last weekend about this 3-4 Vegas, Salt Lake City, Denver swing. And you figure,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if they get 3 points out of this, you'll be happy.
Right.
And in Vegas, a little bit of a back and forth game, kind of some funky goals, a strange no challenge by Patrick Waugh on the first Vegas
Yeah.
goal, and then a strange challenge on the last one. And then they get it to overtime with their own 6-on-5 goal, which I'm sure some people fainted dead away there late at night, seeing the Islanders score one of
Yes.
those again with Matthew Schaefer. And then in overtime, man, you'd have to go a long time watching NHL regular season OT to see a shorty like that, like JG Pageau right off the face-off, right up the ice and in the net. And then in Utah, we were just talking about it before we started. Watched the first period live. Utah was skating rings around them. They just didn't look cohesive. David Riddick really did a nice job keeping it a 1-goal game for a long time there. And again, Matthew Schaefer, what can you say about this kid? It's unbelievable. I was trying to express it the next day on Twitter. Just this is Bobby Orr type stuff, and I am
Yeah.
not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form. You look at the seasons that 18-year-old defensemen have had, and I think I counted up. There's been 75 18-year-old defensemen who've played at least a couple games in a season in their 18-year-old season in the NHL. He's already, I think, tied for 8th in goals for a full season. I mean, Phil Housley had 19 as an 18-year-old rookie in 1982, 83 with the Sabres, and Orr had 13. Aaron Ekblad kind of more recently had 12 when he won the Calder in 14, 15 in Florida. But everything is within reach for this kid, and it's just incredible. We talked about it on our show, talked about it on my other show now about what we're seeing from this kid and how people are starting to notice. And how can you not? Because he's doing things we haven't seen in decades in the NHL, just running an offense, having such a huge impact on the game, playing 26 minutes back to back nights in Vegas and Salt Lake. Just incredible stuff.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to wake up, Arthur. I'm still shocked that a guy this caliber is on the team, but I mean, it's been a hell of a time watching him play, and somehow he ends up topping it from game to game. But I did want to rewind real quick back to the Vegas game, that very unimportant face-off to JG Pageau, shorthanded in overtime. But just what a bull, right? I mean, here you are, like, okay, we're settling for 1 point here. Obviously, Vegas, with the firepower they have, they're going to put one in the power play, a lot of open ice, 4-on-3. And this guy's like, no, I'm going to take care of this myself. Wins that face-off, bowls down the ice, fires it past the goaltender, and a very pleasant, surprising win to the Isles there, eh?
Yeah, yeah, and if we're gonna get technical, when you go forward on a face-off, I don't even know if they just that by this the way the stats are calculated, that might not even count as a win because he's really technically they're both players are trying to go the same direction there because Vegas is trying to win it back. But Pajot's a smart player. He's such a savvy veteran. He recognizes once he's up the ice and it's one-on-one, he's got Mitch Marner there, who's not a defenseman, and he feels like he can go inside out on him, get him to kind of like reach with his stick, which can affect the flight of the puck. I'm sure it affected what Akira Schmid was looking at. It's not a great goal to give up for
Right.
the Vegas goalie, but who
Hmm.
cares? The aggressiveness is what matters. Usually you're thinking in that 3-on-4, kill some time. It's early in the overtime. You can rag 30 seconds off and then hop off the ice. But no, he was going for it. He was going for the win. And I think that's kind of a hallmark of what we've seen
Yeah.
from their penalty killer, tied for the league lead in shorthanded goals. I think with Jersey, they have 4 so far. And even in that situation where you're saying, what, if he misses the net there and it rims around, suddenly Vegas is going odd man rush and it's a lot of open ice, but don't care. You're going for to try to end things, to try to capitalize on some momentum that they generated with the late goal. I applaud it, and it worked out, and luck has been on their side too, and that's a huge thing, in terms of winning games. You can't just do it all by game planning things out and skill and all that stuff. You need a lot of luck in this league, whether it's staying healthy. I mean, we've seen what's happening with the Devils now. Their incredible bad run of bad injuries, or the Rangers couldn't
Yeah,
score,
dinner.
couldn't win at home. You need to be able to have that coin flip heads a few times in a row, and they've got that, and you take advantage of it, and you don't apologize for it because it's just about putting the 2 points up on the board.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're going to open up the floor soon for the audience here. But real quick, I just wanted to touch on Jonathan Joanne's Pele skills, bouncing that puck off of Nate Schmidt. And for me, it kind of opened up another thought. Now, I get that the league is probably trying to just, prevent injuries, and they don't want guys tossing their skates here and there, right, to keep players safe. But at the same time, like, you look at a play like that, and do we really need that distinct kicking motion rule? Like, I feel like if you're skilled enough to tilt your skate, give it a little push, and it goes in the net, I don't mind that counting as a goal because I think instinctively these players are going to be looking to get it on their stick first anyway. And it's really just a very specific type of play where it ends up by your skate, you give it a little nudge, and it ends up in the net. I feel like they should just get rid of it.
Yeah, I obviously the technical reading of the rule there was, Nate Schmidt gets a stick in the way, it kind of
Yeah,
bounces around before it goes in, so that's what makes it count. I think a lot
right.
of fans rightly thought back to the 2019 playoffs at Barclays where Devon Taves had a goal taken off the board where he kicked it from behind the net and it went off the goalie and in. I guess the goalie kind of counts as it directly going into the net, even though Taves was nowhere where he could have directly kicked anything anywhere. And I totally agree. I feel like if unless you've got a wide open net or a situation where you're look like you're lining up an extra point, it should always count. Whether you're trying to kick it skate to stick and it misses your stick and goes off of something, goes off the goalie, pucks bounce off of body parts and go in. So yeah, I'm in agreement there. And again, luck is on your
Right.
side. That we've seen situations like that where goals have come back, even under the kind of the tweak of the rule book from the last couple of years, where they've tried to expand it a little bit more to make more goals count. I think if you're watching the league, you saw the next night. I think it was Minnie and San Jose. Will Smith comes in on a
Yeah.
breakaway puck, goes off the goalie, off of him, back in, and they ruled it was a kicking motion. And that,
Yeah,
that
that's the
feels
right
like
call.
it's a 50-50 call on every single one of these. And the Islanders got it to go their way. Obviously huge to tie the game in the back half of the third period there. And you take advantage of it. You again, don't apologize. Don't worry about it. Don't say, if it goes against you, you say, they're out to get us. Doesn't matter. And I feel like this team, Patrick Waugh has been an emotional guy. I think some of the emotions have spilled over in the year plus that he's been behind the bench. And now they look a little bit more, I don't know. There's just a confidence there that they don't need to be arguing all the time. They don't need to be in the refs' faces about anything. I think maybe there's a lot of comfort in knowing that you've got this generational talent who's been putting up an incredible first 20 games of his NHL career in Matthew Schaefer, and they feel like, all right, we can produce goals. We don't need to scrounge and scrape and argue and beg for goals if something gets ruled against us, and maybe that's the kind of good karma to put out into the universe that they're getting back with getting calls like that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think with everybody moaning with all the time that the officials are taking to replay this stuff, that's one less thing, right? If you get rid of the rule. But Arthur, you got any heroes for this week? You look back at these three games, anybody stand out for you among the many options that the Islanders have?
Yeah, I'm going to go off the ice this week. In my business, and I'm sure Islander fans of a certain vintage can certainly remember Larry Brooks, who covered the
Yeah.
Dynasty era Islanders for the Post, passed away on Thursday. Was just at his funeral today, which was turned into like these things are incredibly sad for him, for his family, but a real celebration. And seeing people there like Lou Lamoriello, who he worked for with the Devils for a few years and has been close with for years and years, and just hearing some reminiscences from his son about those days when he was covering the Islanders when he first worked for the Post in the late 70s and became kind of an integral part of a team that's, the greatest team in the last 50 years in the NHL. Those guys that were friends of his, who we've lost a couple of them in the last few years, and Mike Bossy and Clark Gillies, and Larry wrote so eloquently when those two passed away. So my hero this week is going to be my old friend Larry Brooks, who, if you're a hockey fan in New York and maybe even anywhere in the U.S., you know the name and you've read him and you've either screamed at him through the TV or the newspaper about some
Yeah.
of some of his strong opinions, or screamed in agreement. He was one of a kind, and he's definitely going to be missed, especially for Islander fans of a certain age.
Oh yeah, Arthur, that's a phenomenal tribute. And to your point, I definitely had a love-hate relationship with Larry Brooks's column. Sometimes I was like, I agree with you 100%, and other times like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But for me, I said it on Twitter. I mean, this is a guy who, when I became a fan of just the game at a young age, he was always there. That was always a column, that I read, for better, for worse, whether he was trashing the Isles or not. It's obviously, it's a huge loss to the hockey community to lose an icon like him. So may he rest in peace. Moving on to my hero, I'm keeping it on the ice. Matt Barzal, and plenty to choose from here, but I mean, he gets the tying goal versus Vegas. He gets the overtime goal versus Jersey. Of course, he sets up Matthew Schaefer's overtime winner against Utah. Basically, a mirror image of the tying goal that Schaefer set him up for. Listen, this is a guy who's been the star of this team before Schaefer came around, and he kind of has a running mate up there. I mean, obviously, Bo Horvat's no slouch this season either. But the magic that Barzell and Schaefer are weaving together here in the early going is very exciting, and you have to figure it's only going to get more fun and it's only going to get better. So I'm excited to see what else is to come from these two, and I think Barzell just had a monster week.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think the best part about that 6-on-5 goal in Vegas is Schaefer scores the power play goal early in the game. They're both out there together. And Barzell, we think of him as a distributor, and I think he is such a smart enough player to recognize guys are going to gravitate towards Schaefer because he's not a big bomber. I mean, he's a great shot in Utah. He's just a modern NHL defenseman where he gets pucks through with a little bit of heat on them, but more about the accuracy of trying to get them through bodies and picking corners. So you saw him get that great pass from Drouin from low to high, and two Vegas forwards go right to Schaefer to try to get him. Leaves Barzal open. So you see another way with Schaefer impacting the offense in a key situation. And Barzal knows, I got to blast this. I got to be a goal scorer now. So I think, knock on wood, I think we're going to see Matthew Barzal, if it's not this year, it's going to be over the life of this time that this pairing is together in their offensive situations. Matthew Barzal is going to get 5 to 10 more goals just because he's got a guy like Matthew Schaefer out there with him. So yeah, it's a great pairing, and I think we're going to see tonight when they're playing Colorado. Colorado has probably the most elite D center pairing, D forward pairing in Cale Makar, Nathan
Oh yeah.
McKinnon. Something to aspire to for these two guys. We're certainly not there yet, but it's nice to see it get started.
No doubt. And speaking of tonight, the Isles are going for their fifth win in a row, all on the road. Shabanov comes back in. Mayfield comes back in after the birth of his child. Congratulations there. They re-enter the lineup coming in for Siplikov and Boquist. And of course, Callum Ritchie and Brock Nelson face off against their former teams. And you have the Schaefer versus McCarr narrative, as you just brought up. And of course, the Avs being a top team in the league. Listen, we were concerned about this week going in, as I noted before. weren't sure how this was going to go for the Isles, but I guess tonight is just as winnable as the other ones, right?
Absolutely. I know the Avs haven't lost in regulation at home, but neither are the Devils. Devils hadn't even given away 2 points to anyone at home, so it's still early. And I understand the Avs are definitely a wagon right now, sitting atop the league with their record. But I think the Islanders have done a good job of not worrying about who their opponent is, playing smart, trying to play a complete game, trying to play a fast game. We'll see how Mayfield kind of comes in for Boquist and what that does, and whether Max Shabanov jumping right into the fire here, playing against a team that's
Yeah.
got a lot of speed. So, they looked a little slow off the jump in Salt Lake City against the young, fast Utah team, but they kind of caught up to that game in a good way for the last two periods and really shut Utah down, I thought, in terms of just dominating zone time and chances. Colorado's going to dominate zone time. They're going to get a lot of chances, and I think the Islanders have to try to remember what their transition offense is all about. Playing a little bit of defense first, trying to keep Ilya Sorokin from getting swamped a little too much early, and then find their equilibrium, find their offense, because they've been able to find it every game so far this year.
Arthur, let's talk about that theme of, kind of slow out of the gate for the Islanders, right? You just noted it about Utah. And I guess one of the big differences for this team so far has been the goaltending bailing them out in these instances, right? Where maybe the Islanders are kind of getting hemmed in their own zone. Maybe the D isn't doing the defense as a whole isn't performing as well as you like, but now you have Sorokin and Riddick both doing very well back there.
Yeah, and they're not. It's not perfect. Look, I'm just looking it up right now. 893 save percentage. They're just above the league average of 891. We're not setting any records here. They're not going to be the sort of defensive team that closes teams down and completely shuts down. Like clogs the neutral zone. That's not the way Patrick Waugh wants to play. That's clearly not the way the team wants to play. You've got to find a balance, though. You don't want your goalie to have to make three or four, high danger chance saves before you guys even generate anything. And in that game in Utah, second half of back to back with travel in between, it's a tough spot, and certainly, a rested Utah team that has a lot of young legs, a lot of really skilled guys. So, you're going to give up where you're going to give up. And I think having the confidence in your goaltending, and I think this run that Ilya Sorokin's been on has been huge. Again, obviously,
Yeah.
goaltender needs to be your best player night in and night out. But when it's your number one goalie who hasn't played very well all year, starting with that game in the Garden and going on to Jersey, going on to Vegas, if he can continue it tonight, even if he gives up three like he did in Vegas, I thought he had a really good game there
Yeah.
despite giving up 3 goals. That if you're a goalie and you can get that out of your head that you need to only give up zero, one, or two to really consider it a quality game, you got to play the way that the team around you plays. And so you understand that you're going to face 6 or 7 high dangers a night, and you're going to have to come up with, a few 10 bell saves. And I think Sorokin's kind of embraced that now. I don't know. Can't really pinpoint what factor is the most important one in the turnaround. You just want to hope it continues. And I think for David Riddick, he's really embraced my understanding and meeting him a couple times over the years. He's a big character. He's a big personality guy. It's kind of what you want in a backup goalie. A guy who can keep the room loose, goes in, doesn't have a lot of stress or too many nitpicky things that a lot of goalies have, where you don't want to talk to him or things like that. I think he just seems like a guy who has fun out there and has fun in the room. So it's a good mix, and I think the rhythm that they've gotten into, if it's going to be when the schedule allows 3 on for Sorokin, 1 on for Riddick, that's probably what you're looking for at this point. It's might change as the season goes on, but if Sorokin can handle this workload, we've talked about it a lot. Is he's certainly not a 60 start guy, but if he can be a 55 start guy without faltering, that's probably ideal. And we'll see what he can bring tonight, because he's going to face a lot of high danger stuff from this dangerous Avs team.
Oh, that is 100% accurate. And let's move over to special teams. We checked on it a few shows back, but we have a much bigger sample size here. Islanders 16.7% of the power play, tied for 22nd overall heading into today. 80.6% on the kill, 14th overall. I mean, this is exactly what I think we've been talking about since the end of last season, right? One of the reasons why they might start winning more games if they could just even get the special teams to mediocre, and we're kind of there. And maybe you can just touch on how it's improved and why it's helping out the success here.
I think the aggressiveness certainly on the PK has helped. Took a little while, it seemed like, to find their set forward pairs. We're used to seeing Casey Cizikas out there. He hasn't been a part of the penalty kill this season. I think that was probably a big decision, and one that maybe when Lou was here was not one that Patrick Waugh was willing to make, just because, Lou is such a loyal guy to his players, and Casey has been such an important part of this team. But taking him off of there, having Pajot and Simon Holmstrom kind of be the main forward pair. You've got Kyle Palmieri and Bo Horvat in the mix too. It just seems like it took them a little bit of time with Bob Bugner, I think, who and Waugh, who kind of focus on the penalty kill to figure out what they had back there. Knock on wood, we've gotten some health from Pellick and Pollock through these first 20 games. I think Adam Pellick, is back. Maybe not all the way back, but I think he's back to being the Cobra, as John Tavares once dubbed him back in the day. A guy who, in a very, very underrated way, is an elite defender and an elite shutdown type player. A guy who knows what to do in the defensive zone. I think this pairing with of late with Tony D'Angelo has been really interesting.
Hmm.
And the fact that they've been able to kind of rise up with Alex Romanov out and then back and not really playing his best at all shows that whatever system, whatever commitment to their system that they have seems to be working. And the special teams, especially the penalty kill, is such a feast or famine type thing, and we've seen a lot of
Yeah,
famine over the last couple of
we
years.
certainly have.
But once you get on a roll, and again, it's a lot of luck. It's blocking a shot that if it goes off your body or goes off your stick and it goes wide instead of skipping into the net, the confidence can change like that. And certainly the ability to be aggressive and put teams back on their heels and generate chances when you're shorthanded helps a lot too. So I think that's helping there. And again, like we said, they don't have to be second or third. It doesn't have to be a
Right.
90% penalty kill. 80 to 83%, being in the top half of the league. Power play could be a little bit better. Maybe they can get it a little bit higher. And if they do, they have been a consistently good 5-on-5 team for a couple of years now, even with all the losing and giving up key goals late, all those kinds of things. They have been a team that has been a net positive at 5-on-5 for at least a couple of years now, and if they've seemed to be able to be doing that again this year. So if that continues, and you get those at least average special teams, you can be in a situation like they're in now, going for five in a row.
Yes, it's nice to see those things trending in a positive direction. And Jake, I believe we have a question.
We do from Tom Boyle here. We have
All righty, Tom.
do you think Schaefer will win the Calder and the Norris?
I guess that's on the table now, right, Arthur? I mean, we were joking about it earlier, but I mean, it's there, right?
I mean, he's leading the all defensemen in goals. If this kid who puts up a 20-goal season, and we haven't seen one of those since Dennis Potvin was around, at least around here. Not just the 20 goals. I feel like the Norris. I've been a voter for many years for some of the awards, and my research tends to be who's playing heavy minutes, who's playing impact minutes on
Hmm.
teams that are really good. I think when you burst on the scene, if you're a voter like me, you kind of hone in like, okay, well, I've got Schaefer in this Calder pile, and he's certainly at the top of the pile right now. Maybe Ivan Demidov is competing with him, but if he keeps this up, to me, it's a runaway win for the Calder for Schaefer. But can you bring it over? Can you be a 20? Is he going to be a 24-minute a night guy for a team that's in the top two or three in their division, a team that's definitely going to the playoffs? We're not quite there yet. So I think to unseat the Kale McCarrs and the Miro Heiskanens and the Victor Hedmans of the world, you have to be the
Yeah.
kind of guy who's not just standing out because you're 18 years old. You're standing out because you're the number one defenseman on a really good team. So yes to at least 50% of that right now, and to be determined for the other one. But I will have to say that when this, if he keeps up even 80% of this, there's going to be some Norris trophies in this kid's trophy case for sure.
Yeah, and it's going to be a good time on Long Island throughout the season if he does end up in the Norris conversation later on. And folks, hey, for all you guys hanging out, really appreciate you guys hanging with us. If you got some questions, definitely raise your hand there in the chat. Let us know. We're happy to answer your questions. Till the next one, talking about a lot of good news here. Let's keep it going. I was looking at point streaks before. Bo Horvat, 8-game point streak, 6 goals, 6 assists for 12 points. Barzell's 6-game heater, 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points. And Jonathan Drouin, in his last 4, has put up 7 points, including showing us his soccer skills. Let's focus in on him, Drouin. Another item over the summer here for Matthew Darcy seems to have turned to gold. He's playing great for this team. Arthur, maybe you can just tell us what you've seen.
Yeah, to be honest, much more of an impact than I thought he was going to have. This was a
Yeah.
guy who was not a big signing. I don't think he was in crazy demand as a free agent. I think Matthew Darsh has been in the Tampa organization. That's where Drouin kind of made his bones, was in the Tampa organization. I'd have to go back and look if there was any even, I think they crossed paths at least a couple of years there before Drouin moved on. I think that was kind of, in the same way that Darsh spoke about kind of targeting Emil Heineman as the roster player that would come back in the Noah Dobson trade, because felt like this was a guy who projected out well in the Islanders roster and in their system. I think he felt like Jonathan Drouin had a space to fill on the power play in the top six. He's just a versatile, consistent, reliable guy. And I feel like, you see guys like that. I try to think of some names that come up when you see you say like, man, this guy's a free agent again, like a Mikhail Granlund or someone
Mm,
who's been around the league a long time, who's maybe on the wrong side of 30. I know Druin's just 30 now and has been I think maybe as a guy, good couple of years in Colorado. And obviously you say, okay, you're in Colorado, you're getting to play with some pretty amazing guys. And his 50-point season there a couple of years ago, basically playing for the league minimum, kind of revived him. But you say, okay, well, I think there's a lot of teams that think like we don't have McKinnon and McCarr, maybe he's not going to fit for us. But I think the Islanders, very again, Darsh correctly identified that this was a guy that just could add a little bit more consistency, a little bit more, reliability in that top six, where you're not going to find a guy who's going to drift out of the play too much, or take, just kind of go scoreless for 4 or 5 games. And I think just having a guy that can make that kind of pass like he made to Schaefer to
yeah.
initiate the Barzal goal, that's not a lot of guys have that vision. He reminds me a little bit of Derek Brassard too, just a guy who has been around, knows a lot of people in the league, is liked by a lot of people in the league. You want those guys on your team, especially when you're in a situation like the Islanders are, where you don't really know what you have in Schaefer, you don't really know what you have in the rest of the team. Barzal coming back from injury, new GM, kind of the whole new era situation. You need some of those glue guys, and I think Druin maybe hasn't been that kind of guy over the course of his long career, but I feel like he's found a good spot here, and good that he signed for another year too, to see him really playing like a guy who's playing to stay relevant in the league and playing to have an impact. And that's what you want to see in a new person coming in, because we certainly know year over year, the Islanders really only get one shot at a free agent signing. They're
Right.
not bringing in a bunch of guys. They're not Nashville, where they can sign guys to, no tax contracts, or they're not a place
Mm.
that people who haven't been here know a lot about. And it's just never going to be that way. So when you get your one shot, you got to make sure it counts. And I think Matthew Darsh did a great job making sure this one counted.
No doubt. And Jake, I see we have some more questions filling up in the chat. And
All right, there we
folks,
go.
yeah. And folks, if you want to speak, just raise your hand and Jake will bring you in. But Jake, take it away with those chats.
Yeah, for sure. Let's start with Craig, regular human bartender. He asks, "Will Horvat be the first 100-point player we have seen in years?"
Sure, why not? Sure.
Yeah, I'll call it. Why not?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't.
listen, you never know when the bottom's going to drop on a streak like this, right? And he's been an excellent player for the Islanders since he's come in. Yeah, maybe he's streaked here, streaked there, but I think when you look at the overall package, he just brings so much to the table for the Islanders. And I look back in some games that he's had, and maybe he's shooting the puck and he's hitting the goaltender in the chest, or it's going up into the crowd. But this year, he's finding his spots. He's picking his corners. He's beating the goaltender, and they're filling the net. And you can only hope that continues. But I mean, with the style that this team is playing, and if he keeps it going, yeah, sure, why not? Stay healthy and put up 100 points.
Yeah,
Great.
I got no argument with that.
Next up from Edward, "Do you think we see Isaiah George this year?"
Well, the way that the Islanders had not been able to stay healthy on D, I would say absolutely. But knock on wood, hopefully they are able to stay healthy. If certainly if he was a right shot guy, he'd be here by now, because Tony D'Angelo, that pairing with Alex Romanov was not really good early in the year. Adam Boquist is a nice seventh defenseman, but I think we've seen in his last couple of games, and maybe it's more to do with Romanov's struggles than with anybody on the right side at this point. But my understanding is Isaiah George is playing a lot of rights on the right side in Bridgeport, to try to boost, beef up the depth on the right side, which they don't really have a whole lot of. So I just, it's going to be tough. I think you have that first year like Isaiah George had last year, where he kind of came out of nowhere and forced into a situation with injuries to play that many games at the NHL level. Really acquitted himself well, endeared himself to a lot of people. He's a great kid. And the second year is tough. It gets in your head that there's some expectations there for yourself, that you should be better. You should be able to get back to the league, but everybody's healthy. It's a new GM, all kinds of new situations. So it can set a lot of young guys back. So I don't know if I want to guarantee it. If we're going to see what we've seen before, and some of the older defensemen might break down for a couple of weeks here and there, I think he'd probably be the next guy up, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I
Cool.
don't necessarily mind Isaiah Jordan marinating a little more on the bridge if that's what's needed.
Next up from Isles 47. If they continue to be in the mix, is there a scenario where they move a guy like Pajot to continue building for the future, but maybe also swap a third round pick or a Siplikov to add a rental to still make a push?
Boy, I gotta think that the priority of Scott Malkin and his ownership group is to make the playoffs. And
Yeah,
I understand that wasn't necessarily part of the thought process going into this year, that there was a lot of evaluation and there wasn't any expectations, whether it was even to see Schaefer play more than 9 games, or for this team to be in the mix and kind of he's not jumping to sign anybody to extensions for sure. But I don't see a scenario where, if they are in the position they are even now, where they're in a wild card spot, say, and by the Olympic break, where he's gonna, maybe he'll entertain some offers, and that would probably be the prudent thing to do. But I'd have a hard time believing that you sell off a guy in Pajot with no real replacement ready, and then see if you can still make the playoffs. And what are you adding? A low first round pick and a B level prospect, probably less than that, because that's really what they got for Brock Nelson. So maybe you're looking at a conditional second that turns into a first. I feel like the summer that they had this past summer to really restock their prospect pool kind of eliminates the need to make sure that you get something for Pajot, or that you get something for Anders Lee, especially if the team's going well. Obviously, if they're struggling and they're below the cut line and they're kind of swimming the wrong direction, then yeah, for sure you see what you can get. But I think if they're headed to the playoffs, they're playing well, there's a lot of excitement, the vibes are high the way that they are now. No chance for me that they move either of those guys.
yeah, it's funny, Arthur. Like just watching this early season and overtime, amazing winner aside, I'm like, I don't want to trade this guy. I'm like, I'm like, how do you give this guy up? Now, granted, being a realist, if they're out of it, that's something that Darsh has to look at to maximize return and continue to build the future here for this team. But man, if they're in the mix, I don't know how you don't hold on to this guy, because he's just having such a great year. He's playing so well, and he's been a ton of fun to watch out there. So I mean, if they keep this up, I think it's going to be a little easier of a decision for Darts to hang on to him. But I want to play devil's advocate a little bit, and let's just say this season continues to surprise us in the most pleasant of ways, right? And they continue to play well. They find a way to get into the playoffs. Is there any situation? And I'm not talking 6-7 years here, but is there any situation where Darsh is tempted to keep him around if he continues to have the season he's having?
Yeah, I could see if he is really desiring to stay here too, and he has a good season. Maybe they have a little bit of a playoff run too. They win around, let's say. And again, we're not talking Stanley Cup here, but
Yeah,
the feeling continues to be as good as it's felt so far, and he is contributing in the way that he's been contributing. Absolutely, sign him to a 1 year deal. We're still in a scenario where we're starting to see good things from Cal Ritchie, but
hmm,
are we feeling like he is automatically going to get that 3C role
right.
next season, or even higher? Are we giving up on the idea that Matthew Barzal is going to be a winger or play with Bo Horvat? Obviously, they can have the flexibility there, but I think Pajot is such a important piece on a good team that, again, that may change the calculus as we get towards the deadline. Even if they're good, there may be some teams out there. We're seeing free agents come off the board. Trades are going to be hard to make with the cap going up. Maybe there's going to be an offer that Matthew Darsh can't refuse heading towards the
Yeah.
trade deadline. But failing that, and they decide to keep him, I think that's a commitment to say to him, you're too important to us. You're too important to what we're doing. And I imagine that if there's mutual feelings there, then yeah, there's a chance that you don't want to go beyond a couple of years, really. I think with a guy who's 34 years old. But yeah, I think it's such a tight knit room.
Yeah.
It's such a group that, for better or worse, has stuck together through a lot of thick and thin over the last 6, 7 years. That core group. So we'll have to see. But yeah, it's an interesting debate to have, whether to sell high or buy him back or do whatever. There's a lot of things on the table.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Darsh finds himself in that tricky situation. Jake, what else you got?
Yeah, agree with you there on JGP. I gotta say that overtime goal the other night was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Let's move on to Mark Nagel here. He asks, what options should the Isles consider to revamp their D over the next few years, especially considering the no trade clauses that some of them have?
Mm,
Oh, that's a tough one. The fact that Ryan Pulock, I think it's after next season he goes from a full no trade to a partial no trade. Adam Pelech is already at partial no trade. Scott Mayfield is again a couple years away. I don't know how tradable he is, but I think if you're really looking to make some changes for better or worse, I think it's Adam Pelech. That's the guy that's not only going to bring you back something good because he's still playing at a pretty high level. He's on that left side where you've got Schaefer, he's the number one defenseman right now. So
Right.
you've got Isaiah George coming. You've got Romanov signed long term, even though the struggles have been mighty so far this year. And you've got Kayshawn Aitchison on that left side coming in a couple of years. So that's the side that I think you need to start thinking about creating space for another high end young guy or another couple high end young guys. And Pelech, there's probably other guys you'd want to move first, but really on the right side, they're so thin that I don't even know that if you somehow managed to find a trading partner for, say, Scott Mayfield in the next couple of years, I don't know how you would even replace him with someone that
Yeah.
of kind of similar value and skill set. It's remarkable to think about that they just don't have anybody like that, and maybe that's something they need to target. Even just finding a 7, 8, 9 type guy that you can put in there who's a right shot guy. But yeah, to me, making the necessary changes probably starts with shopping Adam Pelech this summer and seeing what you can get for him, because I think there'd be a pretty high demand for him, even with 3 years left after this season, but very affordable number considering he's 32 and the fact that he's still playing well. And if he can get through a whole season without being injured, which would be a goddamn miracle
I
for
thought we were,
him.
I thought we weren't supposed to bring that up, Arthur. You gave me the business over that. What's going on here?
It's hard to avoid. It's hard to avoid talking about it. But yeah, he's probably the guy for me that I think logic kind of says he'd be on the move, because you need to open some things up, and you can get some decent assets back for him.
Yeah, and I haven't done the work to see if there are any right side defensemen that any teams out there are dangling, but that's obviously, where they need to upgrade. So I don't know who it is, I don't know when it is, but that's something they're definitely going to need to shore up if this team's going to take another step.
We got two more here. So we got from Ziggy Palffy fan. Yeah, great name there. They took Zeke off the PK. When did they healthy scratch him? Father time seems to be calling.
Yeah, that's something we've
Yeah,
talked about, right, Arthur?
yeah, and you don't talk about it with any sort of like eagerness either, because it's Casey Cizikas. It's a
Yeah.
guy who you cut him, he bleeds blue and orange, and there's a reason why he's still on the team and he's not riding off into the sunset with his old identity line buddies. Is that he still loves it. He still plays as hard as he can, and the skills, I think the last couple years have eroded, as they do with anybody who gets into their mid 30s. And I think the difficult part for him, not just transitioning away from having that line that was so effective for so many years, but again, being kind of the signature guy on the penalty kill, even when the penalty kill wasn't good, I think he felt a huge responsibility to be the guy to help make it better. And now he doesn't even get that chance. And yeah, I think we just said it the way that I keep saying it, is that he shouldn't be an untouchable in terms of sitting people out. I understand that you want another center out there, especially on a line that plays 7, 8, 9 minutes a night. You don't want Cal Ritchie taking key defensive zone faceoffs when you're trying to deploy that fourth line. But I think as Cal Ritchie gets some NHL experience, and if you're going to keep him around, then yeah, if Casey's a winger who's just an even strength guy, I think you'd rather see a rotation with him and Siplikov, and maybe even Shabanov, just kind of making sure guys stay fresh. And you'd like to see Casey stay fresh and turn it around and have more of an impact as the season goes on, because your body just doesn't bounce back from the way he plays as the way it once did.
Yeah, and this doesn't necessarily means he needs to be on the 12-man roster every night, but you look back at Matt Martin, right? And you had a situation where, like you were saying, Arthur, where age, starts to catch up with you, right? But just an invaluable guy to not only have in the locker room, but even have on the bench from time to time, right? I mean, this is a guy who's been part of the glue for this team for such a long time, and the fans love him, and you know that they love him in the locker room too. So even if he does, start to have his minutes reduced further, maybe we do start to see him take a couple of nights off. I mean, this is a guy that's going to be valuable to this team in the locker room, and just being around the guys. Maybe they can find a balance there, because I think he is an asset, even if fans are thinking he's not doing as much as he could on the ice.
We got one more here. It's from Craig, regular human bartender, and I know we touched on George before. He asks, "Can we blast Romanov into outer space and bring up more reliable kids like George?"
Yeah, I was going to bring him up, and he's definitely struggling, even coming back off of this injury. You wonder if there's something lingering there, or if he just needs to find his place out there. Because I mean, we've seen better out of him, previous to this season. But I think for whatever reason, he was paired up with D'Angelo in the early going there. We know that that was a struggle, and it seems like even now that he's off of that pairing, it's still been a tough time for him. So Arthur, maybe you can touch on what you're seeing. But this is a guy who, amongst all this great news we're seeing, might be a little bit of a dark spot right now.
Yeah, and thank again, another reason, thank God for Schaefer, because if Romanov was going through this and they didn't have anybody to kind of spell him for those top 4 minutes, the struggles could be really spreading over some key portions of games. So yeah, I think the only solution is to just kind of let him eat it, chip away at it. I think they've kind of knocked his minutes down as much as they can. He's basically the
Yeah.
third pair guy right now, and even at that, making some egregious, noticeable mistakes. But he's working his way back in the penalty kill. The penalty kill has been good even since he's been back. So I think it's just building your confidence back up. You forget this guy's 25 years old. He's really still fairly young as an NHL defenseman. So it is unfortunate, and I'm sure that the contract has a lot to do with it. That there are just some guys when they signed that first huge deal, and I think even he said it, he was surprised at how long it was at the contract that was offered. You feel you got to you got to hit 12 guys and score 4 goals a game to make sure everybody knows that it was worth it, and it's just not the way it works. So and the really poorly timed injury, and it felt like second year in a row. I think it was last year where it just like kind of a day-to-day thing suddenly turned into a few
Yeah.
weeks, and
Mhm.
that really sets you back too. I think for him, it's not the physical stuff. I'm sure he's back up to game speed, but it's a lot of the mental side for him right now. You see the mistakes he's making. They're mistakes of confidence. They're mistakes of rushing a puck or trying to send a pass to someone who's not there. It's just not being able to catch your breath and settle down and say, I belong here. I'm an important part of this team. So we're going to see better from him for sure. And I think it's just going to take a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money, and I think it directly connects to what Wah said in that post game not too long ago, where nobody's harder on himself than Romanov, right? And that tells you that this is a guy who might be thinking too much right now, right? He's not going out there and I mean, these players, they play their best when they're not thinking. They just go out there and it's almost second nature. It's almost like they're playing while they're sleeping, where it just comes naturally. They play their game, almost like Matthew Schaefer every damn night. But this is a guy in Romanov who it just looks like he's thinking the game too much, and that puts you a little bit behind the eight ball, and that's why you're seeing some of these mistakes and whatnot. So hopefully he can just recapture his confidence and get back to the game that we've seen previously.
All right, so we got from Joe Horvat, not Bo Horvat,
Okay.
but Joe Horvat. He asks, what pieces specifically do you think are missing for them to make a deep playoff run?
Oof, it would be weird if Bo was asking us a question right now. He should probably get preparing for the game, but appreciate it, Joe. For me, I think it's probably a little bit better depth on defense, at least on the right side. I think Ryan Pulock and Scott Mayfield have done a lot of good for this franchise for a lot of years. I just am concerned, I guess, that they can hold up and keep up the speed and kind of the intensity of a late season playoff push and into the playoffs. You're seeing a lot of good stuff. I don't have a lot of concerns about them offensively. Obviously,
Hmm.
defensively is a different story, but I think that's a stylistic, structural thing, and they obviously have to cut down on the high danger chances. There's, the one thing that I've learned from my data guru Steve Valiquette is that if you are in the bottom third of the league and giving up high danger chances the regular season, you basically have zero chance to advance far in the playoffs or even get in. You just can't keep giving up stuff like that, no matter how good your goalie is. You really have to be able to outscore your mistakes and have a goalie who can put up a 920 or higher save percentage. And if they can do that, great. But I don't know how sustainable that is in 4 playoff rounds. So, I think making some tweaks to their system at 5-on-5 to limit chances, to be a little bit tighter in the neutral zone and the D zone, and probably a small upgrade personnel wise. I'd be interested to see, they're going to have the cap space at the deadline if things kind of go the way that
Hmm.
they're going. And a lot of teams may not this year just because of the new LTIR rules that the league has. You're not going to see teams, pull the shenanigans, the Matthew Kachuk shenanigans or the Nikita Kucherov shenanigans that Tampa and Florida pulled on the way to long playoff runs the last few years. So, if the Islanders can find a depth defenseman, preferably a right shot guy, just to again, not even as good as Jonathan Jerome, but just a guy who has been around, can kind of, you think about the Andy Green trade, which is maybe a little bit bigger one, but
Mm,
someone who can fill that kind of role, a veteran guy who just gives them a little bit more versatility back there, a little bit more dependability, and seeing that they can kind of reduce the chances against and be a team that's not going to cheat for offense and going to be a little bit harder in the, in front of their net, a little bit harder in the neutral zone to keep teams from coming the other way. So yeah, I still don't see a Stanley Cup contender right now, but
right.
I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. I think what we're seeing is a team that's building something and getting some good fortune, getting some good decisions, getting some good bounces, and showing a lot of fortitude. That to me is the most important part, redeveloping that identity of we can win anytime we go on the ice. It's been gone for a couple years, and if that can come back, sky's the limit, even with the group that they have.
Yeah, and real quick, just to wrap that up, I do wonder if, the Islanders do find themselves in a position where, they could be knocking on the playoff door here. If Darsh would kind of go off course with the future plan, right? Where he's even willing to unload assets to add something to this year's team. I'm inclined to think that he's just kind of ready to let the chips fall where they may if they happen to get into the dance.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think evaluation doesn't always mean we're going to have 70 points and then figure it out at the end. You can evaluate a 100-point team, a 95-point team, a playoff team. There's nothing set in stone, and there's no reason why you can't say we're thinking about, if things go one way, we'll get rid of X, Y, and Z. If things go the other way, maybe we'll add a little bit, and we'll see what we want to do with those guys in the summer. The idea that you have to get something for a pending free agent that might not re-sign, to me, takes a backseat to making the playoffs. This team needs to keep those vibes going. They need to keep the excitement level high. They need to have a positive playoff experience in UBS. We really haven't had that yet, of the two playoff trips that they've had. I think the priorities are pretty fluid, and yeah, you don't need to rush to make changes just yet.
We shall see how it all unfolds. But first, we got the Avalanche up tonight against the New York Islanders. So, hey, folks, want to thank you all for hanging out and participating tonight. Next time, don't be shy. Hit that button there, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear you speak with us. So, we'll probably do this again down the road sometime. But again, thanks to everybody. Also, want to thank Knock Hockey and Razor Kniffen Lonstein for supporting the show. And of course, big thanks to Arthur and Jake for hanging out. Guys, this was a lot of fun, eh?
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Got to do this
Definitely
again.
was.
For sure. So again, everybody enjoy the game tonight. We will see you next week at Bagel Boss in Hewlett for your bagel before the stable. Good night, everybody. Go Isles.